Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. I thought today it would be fun to do something a little bit more on the industrial looking side. And so I'm going to make kind of a thick, solid ring made out of a cast slab that I cast a while back. And I think I'm going to put a piece of turquoise on top of it. I like to mix turquoise with less traditional kind of looking settings just because it makes it stand out, I think, because it's almost always set in similar ways. And so we'll do something a little different with it today and see how it comes out. Before we do that, though, I need to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. I have a new one, and it's either Lucia or Lucia, I'm not sure, but Lucia C, thank you for signing up. I appreciate your support. I think it's a really nice community over there, and I'm glad that you've decided to become a part of it. I think you'll like them. The other group are my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 25,100. Thank you for that. That's awesome. I get such nice comments from you, and I really do appreciate that. So thank you for that. And I do appreciate also the financial contributions, like the Buy Me a Coffees, the super thanks, people who buy my merch or my ebooks. Those things really help, and I appreciate it. You make my channel sustainable, and I appreciate it. So, all right, well, let's get started on this cool ring. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks that are available on my merch store. This particular one has a handy gauge to inches to millimeters chart on the back. The real feature in all of these that I like the most, though, is the dot matrix in the background. It helps me to be able to draw straighter lines and things. And since I started the channel, I started recording every project that I did, and that's been really kind of nice. I think I would suggest it, honestly, because then you can go back and see how you did something, because once you get to a certain point, you don't remember everything you've made anymore. And having a record of how you did it is nice. So get yourself one or two of these. I think they're handy. Some of the other ones have different information on them too as well. That's useful. Right now through December 5th, we're having our Black Friday sale. So everything in the merch store as well as my website are 20% off during that time frame. So check it out. I was thinking about something sort of clunky and brutalist. I've seen some similar things to this. And I was playing with it, and I thought, well, let's put a stone in it. So I sized it down a little. This is a little huge. This is going to end up being about a size 8 1/4 maybe. And I'm going to cut it out of a 3.9 millimeter slab I have that I cast a while back. And it's kind of fun to have a thick chunk of silver to carve stuff out of or whatever. And so I'm going to take advantage while I have one and go ahead and do that. I'm going to cut some trenches here. I'll probably use the saw to get them started and then use a file or something to widen them out a little bit. We'll try and get those really consistent if we can. Bezel is going to be made out of 26 gauge 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, which translates into 4.76 millimeters by about 0.41 millimeters thick. And the bottom of the bezel, I'm just going to use 26 gauge sheet, which is 0.41 millimeters as well. So I think we'll make the bezel first. That's pretty straightforward. I rolled the slab through the rolling mill a couple of times to just make sure it's got a pretty symmetrical surface. I'll probably still file the surface off anyway, but I wanted it to make sure it was pretty even. And I annealed it so it's sitting in the pickle right now. So let's make the bezel. When we're done with that, I'll fish that out of the pickle, and we'll kind of, I think I'll trace this, maybe glue it right onto the slab, and then we'll use that as a guide to cut. So, all right, let's get started on that bezel. Anymore, I almost always use 26 gauge for the bezel. I used to sometimes use 28 gauge, but it is really flimsy. So here's this. Oh, I didn't show you the stone. I picked out a turquoise here. I'm gonna situate it this direction. Well, this direction. It's pretty thin, so we're gonna have to back it with some stuff to raise it up a bit, because I need some bezel down in there to make it look the way I want it to look. So yeah, so we'll use this to make our stone. I was looking for a perfect square, and I didn't really have anything in the perfect square, but I do like doing turquoise contrasting with more of a modern style because it's kind of fun to change things up. This has kind of got like angled off corners on this one. Got a slippery stone today. That's probably close enough. I can do some fine tuning after I cut it and solder it. But I'm going to leave just a tiny bit beyond where they meet, so I have some room to file. Alright, so let's solder this closed. I use hard silver sheet solder for most things. Here's my setup that I use with my torch and everything. So let's get this soldered. So I went years without doing much sawing as far as jewelry making is concerned, but once I got a better saw, it was much easier. So I would get a good saw if you're starting this out. Oops. So we'll see how my sawing skills are tonight. I'll be using a number 00, I think, probably, even though it's a thick sheet. I like that size. It makes a nice clean cut. It's just a pretty good generic size. You can use whatever saw blade you like, but the general rule of thumb is when you're cutting something, there should be about 3 teeth in contact with a piece of metal at all times, is what I've always been told. And that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Yeah, we got it pretty good, I think. I'm going to get this shaped relatively well before we solder it down to a piece of sheet. I think I ended up with a good fit, but not so snug that it's impossible to get it in there. But it's pretty close. So, and I made a mark for the side I want to solder down onto the sheet. So let's find some 26 gauge sheet. You could use thicker if you want to. Once this is in there, it's going to be soldered partway up the side of the bezel though, so I don't suspect it's going to be a big, weak, flimsy thing. That's a good spot, probably. Let's make a mark. hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. Those people who are watching who celebrated Thanksgiving. And didn't overeat too much, as is my tendency anyway. Just gonna make sure those are touching the sides and the bottom. And we're going to heat around the base right where the two come together. Alright, I think it's time to start thinking about our little slab here. I got that pretty much done. Okay, I'm going to smooth it out just a little bit. Be right back. Alright, so I got a little notebook paper. I'm going to trace this right here. So I'm not going to cut these parts out because I'm going to have to go this way and that way. And so I'll probably use the saw after we get the hole cut out and everything. And this indent we'll do after we sit the bezel on top of it and make scratches so we can kind of measure where it's going to fit and get it a little more accurate, hopefully. So let's go over, well, I'm going to glue this on to the slab, and then we'll let's see what we can do with the saw. I have to use super glue for this. It's just what I have on hand. I used to use rubber cement to glue stuff like this on, but that doesn't really stay on very well when you're trying to cut with a saw, or it didn't for me. So, all right, so we're going to cut the hole out first, and then we'll cut the square out, I think. So let's head over. Welcome to my raggedy looking bench pin. I drilled a hole in this and fed the saw through, so let's see if we can get some progress made. As you can see, my sawing isn't perfect, but I can even that out with the rotary tool with the sanding bit. Just kind of smooth that out into a nice circle. Let's cut out the outside now. Okay, let's go clean it up a little bit with the file. I'm going to spend a little time trying to get this file flat. I might use my miter vise jig here and just line it up in there and see if I can get it pretty flat that way. Close enough. I'm going to do the other four sides and I'll be right back. So I got things cleaned up a little bit. I marked the side I think I'm going to make the top because I kind of left one side just a little bit wider. That's what I was shooting for anyway. And we need to make some marks where we're going to do some cuts. And I think first off, let's decide how deep we want this to be inset into it. Like that. Then we gotta kind of, let's find the center. Let's find our bezel here and see how wide that is. Let's see how wide this bezel is. Duh. Okay, we've got 14 millimeters about. So that'd be 7 to either side of this. That looks pretty close. So I think I'm going to cut that out, as much of it as I can, and then I'll file it so it's nice and neat. But along the way I'm going to be getting this to fit in there too. So let's do that next. Okay, so I got everything all cleaned up and this notch cut. This fits in here. And then I thought I was filming from the side, but I wasn't. And so I went through this really well done explanation of how to line these up, and I marked the center point going up and down on this here. And I had these. I just measured on here like this. And then I marked these off here, 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 all the way around. And then same thing up here. And so now we're going to go over and use the saw to cut some notches here. One way to get your saw blade started in a spot is to use a little cut in the block here to guide it until it's started cutting. So like that. So now I can move it out of there. Okay. Also need to do it on this side here, but I want it to line up with that one. Okay, I'm going to use my needle file to kind of widen those a little bit. There you are. I saw a similar design somewhere online, so I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes by using the design on the band. I think it was just in a collection of kind of brutalist looking stuff. So it's mostly an homage to general brutalist kind of things, you know. Well, I think let's solder this on there and see how things look. I think let's sweat some solder on the back of this, and it'll be easier to position it on here. Not a lot of soldering in this video. I have some right here, so here's my third hand. I'm going to use that probably. So most of the mass is in the band on this one, so we're really going to be focusing the heat down there because the bezel has very little comparatively. It's easy to melt something as thin as the bezel while you're trying to bring up this big hunk of metal to the right temperature. I think I'm going to cool that off and take a look at it and see how it looks. Okay, I think that's a success. We'll let that pickle for a while, I'll polish it, and then we'll set the stone. So we got everything all polished up, turned out pretty nice. And I've got the stone set at about the right level. I filed the bezel down a bit, and then I used a little bit of tag board cut into pieces to get it to the height I wanted it to be. And I do this a little differently than some people. I use the flat side of my chain nose pliers as a bezel pusher. And so I'll be kind of like laying it down that way. Okay, and the last stage, we're going to use the rounded outer part to burnish the top edge, make it shiny and tight against the stone. So last thing I'll do is I'll probably take a little bit of my Dremel with blue fine silicone polishing wheel and just kind of clean up any kind of scratches I left from setting the stone. The top edge of the bezel there a little bit. And we'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Tell me what you think. Honestly, from what people tell me, I don't wear a lot of jewelry. But square rings like this are supposedly more comfortable than round rings, honestly, because they don't push as hard against the fingers next to them. So, tell me what you think. What would you have done differently? All right, well, that was the industrial turquoise ring. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you go. It really helps to get my channel promoted, and I'd love it if you'd leave a comment. Also, if you want, check out my main channel page on YouTube here. I have 562 videos last I looked, I think. I've been doing 3 per week for almost 4 years now, so there's a lot of content over there. And a whole bunch of really great ideas for projects, as well as resources for beginners up through advanced people. So check it out. There's a lot of cool stuff. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. There's no cost to do that. And it does also help get my channel promoted when the more subscribers I have. So don't forget to hit the video description down below. There's some important links there. If you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks, there's a link to my merch store. Those are super useful and a nice way to keep track of your projects. There's a link to my ebooks, the most recent being 2024's. It has a link to each of the tutorials I did during that year. And on the page for each tutorial, it has a picture of the sketch that I drew, a picture of the final product, what you need to make the project, kind of a difficulty rating, as well as some notes I made about the project outside of what I put in the video. So things I learned, things I might do differently, things I thought about after the fact and might have changed. So lots of good information there. And it's a really nice way to support my channel. So thanks for that in advance. Finally, there's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that community over there. It's a really nice group of people. I really enjoy tapping into their knowledge, getting to know them. It's a pretty international group, so there's people from all over the world, and that's always fun to meet people from different cultures. So check it out if you're interested. It's a nice place over there. All right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.